And as the mind becomes calm, the distractions will become less and less aware. And then your attention, let's say the focus of your consciousness, will start to move in various places around the body. You can let this happen as long as you're still aware of movement of breath. Because what is happening is, this is a panacea, this is a healing process. So as the breath is, movement is now the predominant and hopefully the exclusive thought, even though the distractions are coming and going, you're pulling back to the breath will start to move around different parts of the body and go to where it needs the body needs healing. Because breath is prana, breath is spirit, breath is life force. And so as soon as we can get over the distraction of the mind and focus on the breath, this breath, which is the link to the self, will begin to move through the body and untie the knots, the grunties, the spiritual places where it is bound up. Now this can also be a method used in healing yourself. If we feel sick in any region of the body, you let the breath, keep your awareness on the movement of the breath and have it go to that area and literally feel as if you're breathing in and out through that area. Even if it's a physical place in the body. Let's say your knees are really giving you trouble. You just aware of the movement of the breath, whether it be in the nostrils, the abdomen, or chest, and then literally move it to the knee, or both knees, and feel as if you're breathing literally in and out of your knees. And feel the calm, rejuvenating release of tension. Then move along to another place. But the idea is mainly, this is a practice for spirituality. This is a practice for illumination of the mind. The healing aspect of it can be done from time to time. But the main practice is to just be with the breath and let it flow, become aware, and as your distractions start to dissipate, you'll start to feel many unusual and divine things. And especially the Buddha talked about this when he said, in what was called his 7 factors for awakening, when it was asked of him, how do we develop and pursue awakening and bring it to its culmination? He gave 7 factors for doing it. They're very profound. We should go over them quickly. When we stay focused, number 1, we stay focused on the body in and of itself. We become ardent, alert, and mindful. We put aside greed and distress with reference to the world. So in other words, we're in an interior world right now through the breath. We're watching the breath. The world is apart. The second, the Buddha said, we put aside all, and we start to gain the quality of discernment. The analysis of qualities as the factor of awakening becomes aroused. So what's happening now is we're down watching our breath. True discernment is starting to arise because we're taking the intellectual mind, and which is the kind of muscle of the lower mind, all the thoughts. We're calming that down, and as the intellectual mind starts to recede, the intuitional mind starts to expand. And as the Buddha said, we get true discernment. Now we can start to observe our nature. The third is, our persistence becomes aroused. We get the strength to stay in the interior aspect of the mind and to watch it work, which is something we normally don't do. We just, when we have distracting thoughts, we just want to say, no, this is just a pile of stress. With awareness of the breath, we get this discernment, we get persistence, and now we get acute awareness of what's going on inside the mind. Then we move to number 4, which is very wonderful and interesting, because the Buddha said, in one whose persistence is aroused, a rapture not of the flesh arises. When a rapture not of the flesh arises in one whose persistence is aroused, this rapture, this feeling of bliss, as a factor for awakening becomes aroused. He said he develops it, and for him it goes to the culmination of development. So, what we're finding now is the Buddha actually acknowledging now we're getting a rapture and a bliss from just quieting the mind and staying focused on the breath, which is not of the flesh. Meaning, if it's not of the flesh, it's of the spirit. As we spoke last week, the Buddha's questioned a lot as to why, what about the idea of self, God, the divine nature? He didn't talk about it. Basically said, my goal, my teaching is to alleviate suffering. And so this suffering is the way to do these two. You alleviate suffering and stress by watching the breath, and then serenity comes. Because the next number 5 is, he said, when you experience this rapture of the spiritual nature, your whole mind and body becomes serene. And then from this serene state, the 7th factor of awakening is the body calm, the mind becomes concentrated. You can see the significance of this breath meditation because it's developing conscious concentration and awareness. The concentration comes after the feeling of bliss. This is why we need to stay focused and just not relax and say, oh, this is wonderful, because this persistence, we realize if we let it go deeper and we persist, then we will come to this state where we become fully concentrated. Then at the end, the Buddha says, then we carefully watch the mind, thus concentrated with equanimity. When we carefully watch the mind with concentration, equanimity as a factor of awakening becomes aroused. We develop it, and this takes us to the culmination of enlightenment, a culmination of an expanded mind, simply by watching the breath and staying with it. Now, again, just briefly to go quickly over, we first just watch and pull the distractions back to the movement of the breath. It's going to happen maybe 1,000 times. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't mean you're a bad meditator. As Paramahansa Yogananda said, when you're trying to dive deep into the mind to gather the pearls of the state of equanimity, and you don't do it, don't blame the ocean and don't blame the pearls. Blame your skill in diving. So this is why the Buddha said you should be persistent even when the state of bliss comes and rapture comes. And it is overwhelming because it is something that, as even the Buddha said, not of the flesh. It's something that's overwhelming. We stay persistent. That is why we set a time. We say, I'll meditate for 30 minutes or an hour or what it takes, and we'll just sit. Now, is there any questions? We'll go over this at length later when we kind of sum it all up. Okay, so this is the idea. This is breath meditation, or this is what is called respiration mindfulness. It is simply watching the movement of the breath and then letting the mind become calm, serene, rapturous and blissful, and then finally concentrated. So, practice is the key. The highest virtue, the Buddha said, of all the virtues, patient persistence is the key. So may we persist and reach that culmination of enlightenment.